Today in geography class, we're going to take a look at the online assessment for Chapter 7. You can see here in my assessments page, I have assigned to the entire class Chapter 7 Test, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean Islands, Form B. You've got obviously from the Wednesday when this is assigned to the rest of the week to get this done. I prefer that it's done on Wednesday. You'll submit this test and it'll come in, and then I'll go through to check, make sure that you've got the essay question at the end completed correctly. Now we'll go through that together right now, so if you're following in this video, it'll help a great deal in terms of completing this assessment and making sure that you've learned what we've been after in these lessons in the study of this region of the world. Remember that the paper form of the test is what I'm going to display to you, but the online form of the test is what you're going to be completing. So don't get that confused and say, well, I didn't get a test. It's actually been assigned online. Again, you can go into the student edition where you can go through the different types of chapters and lessons, but you're not going to look in this section for that. You're actually going over here to the assignments and projects. If it's not displayed here, you click the See All button and you'll see what those upcoming assignments are. Obviously, because I'm in the teacher-student mode, it doesn't show anything here, but in your form, it would, because as you just saw, it's been already assigned to you, going to go live tomorrow. Sorry, on the day of the actual test when you're viewing this. So if we take a look at that form of the test, here's what the paper version would look like. Those questions are going to be exactly the same as the online form, and we'll go through those to help you prepare and make sure that you've got these things completely ingrained in your brain, that we've learned them. So the first section is true and false. It says indicate whether the statement is true or false. If the statement is false, rewrite it to make it true. Number one, Mexico and Central America form a peninsula between North and South America. That would be false. They don't form a peninsula. A peninsula sticks out into a body of water and is covered on three sides. This would be an isthmus because it's between North and South America, and it's this smaller, more narrow body of land between two other bodies of water, the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific Ocean. Number two, Mexico and Central America are bordered by the Pacific Ocean on the west. That's true. Number three, Mexico gained its independence in 1821. If you had to go back and check in the historical lesson, lesson 2 from the section, that would be true. Number four, the Columbian Exchange resulted in spread of disease into different parts of the world. We took a specific look at the Columbian Exchange in lesson 2 as we talked about the history, and also in our geography skills activity when we were making different generalizations and seeing what was happening with this exchange. You could have watched 2 other videos that were assigned on that day to learn a little bit more about the Columbian Exchange. You'd probably say that that's true as well, that those diseases were spread from that movement in that triangular pattern. Number five, Cuba has a strong economy. We'd say false. Cuba has a poor economy because of communism, or what is known today as socialism, the idea that everybody should be equal and the government should control everything. It's not always what's in the best interest of the people. In numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, it asks you to do matching with these vocabulary terms. Number 6, former British colony. It'd be the only one of those colonies that is English-speaking that we know, and because it has that English-speaking, you know, or the language that it speaks, you know that that's the country that had colonized it at one point. Belize is an English-speaking country. 6 is A. 7, group of Caribbean islands. 7 is going to be D, the Greater Antilles. You've got the Greater Antilles and the Lesser Antilles, a collection of larger islands and lesser islands all throughout the Caribbean. In number 8, more food than is needed to survive. Number 8 is an example of a surplus. That's a context vocab. Surplus means I have more food than I need. Number 9, vertical climate zone that is also known as cold land. Tierra fria. Tierra meaning land, fria meaning freezing, freezing cold, cold land. Number 9 is B. 10, the Caribbean country that has a successful economy, that is Trinidad and Tobago. Why does that have a successful economy? Because it has oil and natural gas resources, and it's really close neighbors with Brazil and Venezuela that have appetites for those types of exports that they have. So there's good relations with those countries that are larger, that have that need, and they obviously have that energy resource, which is highly valuable to their economy. Numbers 11 through 19 are multiple choice. Which of the following is one of the world's most important waterways? The Rio Bravo del Norte, the Panama Canal, Lake Nicaragua, or the Rio Grande? You could probably make an argument for all of them, but the question itself says which is most important waterways. In terms of importance, doesn't mean that they're not significant, but it's probably the Panama Canal because of the major trade access that happens between the different countries and the access that people have from the Gulf of Mexico into the Pacific Ocean, not having to go all the way around South America. Number 12, which of the following statements refers to Aztec farming? A, they forced conquered peoples to do the farming. B, they were not skilled farmers. C, their religion prohibited raising corn as a crop. Or D, they grew crops on small islands that they built in a lake. If you remember that term, it was called chinampas. 12 is D. 13, during the colonial period, which area did Britain claim? Haiti, Belize, Mexico, Cuba. Britain, being England, the English-speaking nation, claimed Haiti during this colonial period. They also claimed Belize, so you could maybe get both of those answers. We're going to take A as the best answer. 14, which country do economists predict will become the leading economy in Latin America in the 2010s? Mexico, Cuba, Honduras, Haiti. We have already learned that Mexico has an up-and-coming economy. We've learned that Cuba is struggling because of communism. We didn't talk much about Honduras in terms of its economy, and we talked about some of the issues politically with Haiti and their usage of resources, or the overusage of resources, and the overall poverty in their country. So A is going to be the most beneficial in that form. Number 15 asks us to read through this paragraph and then answer the questions based on these excerpts. Mexicans are proud of their blend of Spanish and native cultures. They have long celebrated the folk arts that reflect native traditions in the early 1900s. Several Mexican painters drew on these traditions to paint impressive murals celebrating Mexico's history and people. Murals are large paintings made on walls. The ballet folklorico performs Mexican dances. Based on the excerpt, what is folk art? 15, A, painting made on walls, B, art of dancing, C, art of the early 1900s, or D, art that reflects native traditions. In number 15, you're going to say D, art that reflects native or folk traditions. 16, based on the excerpt above, what were the subjects of murals painted in the 1900s? They have long celebrated the folk arts that reflect native traditions. In the early 1900s, several Mexican painters drew on these traditions to paint impressive murals. Mexican dancers, painters, history and people, Mexican walls. What were the subjects of their paintings? 16 is going to be C, it's history and people, the traditions of these people. 17 and 18 ask us again to read this excerpt. In Haiti, a history of poor political leadership has held back economic development. Haiti ranks among the world's poorest nations. Poverty is not the country's only problem, however, widespread disease is a threat as well. In addition, as many as 1 in 8 Haitians have left the country. Many of those emigrated were among the Haiti's most educated peoples. This loss hurts efforts to improve the economy, and finally, the country has not yet recovered from the deadly 2010 earthquake. Despite these problems, Haiti's people are determined to succeed. Number 17, based on the excerpt above, what can be said about the poverty in Haiti? A, it's comparable to that of many other small nations. B, it is not the only problem Haiti has to face. C, the spread of disease is worse than poverty in Haiti. And D, every effort is being made to combat poverty in Haiti. Based on the excerpt, I believe it's focusing on the idea that that's not the only problem in Haiti. Obviously, they're one of the most poorest nations, and their poverty is a problem, but widespread disease is a problem. Political leadership is a problem. The people who are educated are leaving is a problem. So it's pointing out multiple issues besides the fact that it's one of the poorest nations, unfortunately. 18. Based on the excerpt above, why do you believe that many of Haiti's most educated people have left the country? Well, if it's one of the poorest nations in terms of economic development and poor political leadership, doesn't seem there's like a lot of economic opportunity there. So even if you're educated, you can't get a good job if the economy that you're in doesn't provide that good job for you. So based on the excerpt, why do you think, or why do you believe that most of Haiti's educated people have left the country? A, they felt out of place among those who were less educated. B, they want to go where there is more opportunity to apply their skills. That sounds pretty good. C, they do not want to improve their skills. Or D, they want to improve the economy in Haiti. Most likely B, because they want to go where there's more opportunity. If they're educated, they can get a higher level job, and then some of that money might be sent back home in terms of a remittance. Number 19, in a tropical wet dry climate, when does the dry season occur? Because we're talking here in now the central portion, or in the equator portion, the tropics, it's a little bit different than the 4 seasons that we experience towards the North Pole or in the northern hemisphere. 19 is going to be C, during the summer months. In a tropical wet dry climate, when does the dry season occur? during the spring and summer months is going to be when that dry season occurs. Okay? Number 20. Discuss the Aztecs' conflict with the Spanish. Why were the Aztecs defeated by a small force of conquerors? How did the Spanish conquest affect life in Mexico? Your summary in writing this in your own words might sound something like this. Although their numbers far exceeded those of the Spanish conquistadors, and even if they were fearsome warriors, the Aztec were no match for the foreign force of the Spanish. The Spanish had guns and armor, and the Aztec only had spears and other basic weapons. Also, the Aztec had little resistance to the disease that the Spanish brought with them. Thousands of Aztec people died as a result of that disease. The Aztec had few allies among other native peoples, and they resented being under Aztec rule. So before the Spanish got there, the Aztec were kind of the king of the mountain, and they were the head of all these other peoples, and they had conquered other peoples with really gruesome war. Those people were not allies to them. They were actually enemies that were living under their control. So as soon as another enemy comes in, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, the Spanish join up with those other tribes to go against the Aztec and overthrow them. The conquistadors played on this resentment and won more native peoples to their side and then beat the Aztecs that way. After their defeat by the Spanish, life in Mexico changed dramatically. Mexico was now a colony of Spain, which controlled the government, economy, and society. The native peoples were converted to Catholicism by Roman Catholic priests and missionaries, and the people were also forced to work on farms or in mines by the Spanish conquistadors. The wealthiest people in colonial Mexico were now the settlers from Spain. Another influence is if those people are dying, based on the colonialism and the disease that's brought, is the need to bring in slaves in that Columbian exchange slave trade to work in these areas, not only in Mexico, but in also the other parts of the Caribbean. Hope that helps. If you need to replay this last bit to think about how you want to put that question to our essay, the answer to your essay question in your own words, please do so. God's blessings.